Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining me again on Talking True. And today we have a guest who's been with us before. His name is Morgan O. Smith, and he's going to be joining us, and we're going to have a deep conversation about understanding non-duality. Well, understanding and experiencing non-duality. So, Morgan, thank you for joining me again today. I'm really looking
Yeah,
forward to the conversation.
thank you for having me once again. I really, really appreciate it. And it'll be we can dive into this topic and see where it takes us. And yeah, this will be interesting, intriguing, and I hope everyone who's watching will get a little piece of something that will be said here. See where it
Good.
goes.
Yeah. So why don't you start maybe with for those people that don't know what non-duality is, from your own direct experience, how would you explain that?
Well, first I'll go by the actual meaning of it in regards to um, uh, what the teachers, the wise people of the past, the gurus, the seekers, the philosophers of what they mean by it. So non-duality um, means one without a second, or one without a second, and or not two. So one without a second, not two. So when someone says one without a second, they're just saying there's only one. There's no second thing or no second entity. And when they say not two, a lot of people will say non-duality is oneness. In non-duality, they would say, well, it's not two. So meaning that true non-duality also transcends the idea of one. So they will just say not two to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
But still, if someone says it's talking about non-duality and they mention oneness, we all understand what they're saying, pretty much. But they try to avoid that whole oneness thing because for those who've experienced actual true non-duality, you can't even pinpoint it to one or a singularity or anything like that. So even that goes away as well. So yeah, so from that standpoint, that's what non-duality really means. But of course, there can be a lot of misconceptions about non-duality because sometimes when people are talking about spirituality, they always throw the word non-duality in there, and it's not always non-dual. So I just want to be clear with people who hear the term that not everyone who's talking about non-duality is talking about actual non-duality. They may be talking about other aspects of spirituality, which are also necessary. But non-duality, when it means one without a second, we're talking about we're talking about See, trying to find that thing. We're talking about, if I'm going to use the word singularity in this case, where we're talking about a singularity that includes absolutely everything. So again, in non-duality, um, there are no distinctions between anything. So you have the word non-duality, which is of the opposite of duality. So in our reality, we experience duality. So I'm here, you're there. There's an up, there's a down, there's a left, there's a right. Um, right now in my mind, I'm thinking subjectively as I look out in the world, which is supposed to be objective. So you have the subject, you have the object, you have the object, you have the subject. But in the moment of the actual experience of non-duality, the subject and the object merges into not two. I'm trying to not say one thing. So it merges into the not two. And that happens with everything. So left and right merges into the not two, up and down merges into the not two. Again, subject and object merges into not two. Atman and Brahman
Mm-hmm.
merges into not two, and it goes on and on and on and on. And then when that is fully experienced as pure non-duality, all there is all there is.
Mm-hmm.
So when a lot of people are speaking about that, because we already know only right now it's only a very small percent of people who ever experience pure non-duality. Yet you hear a lot of people talking about it as if it's a direct experience. In most cases, for those who are talking about non-duality, it's talked about from a conceptual, intellectual point of view. People who study it, scholars who studied it, who have a sense of what non-duality is on paper, but even then, when one experiences pure non-duality, it surpasses even that. Nothing can describe what is known as pure presence, non-dual consciousness, infinity, everything. So
Mm-hmm.
just to get a basic idea of what non-duality is. But also, there's also different levels to that. Even though levels is not probably the proper term because it's non-dual, there can't be any levels. But from our standpoint, who are looking at the worlds as being, or the our realities as being dual, there can be different forms of non-duality because, of course, as you are this individual having this experience of non-duality, it may be too much too soon for a person who's starting to tap into this reality. So it depending on the synchronization of the brain, the 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 the, the synchronization of the brain, um, balancing of the chakras, the purification of the nadis, all that would have to take place for someone to really take in the actual experience of non-duality and not go crazy as a result. So that's very important too. So in the beginning stages, when someone experiences non-duality, and this is different for different people. So what I'm saying is not true for everyone. But a person may experience non-dual, not as an absolute, but they may experience non-dual in a sense of conflicting ideas. So if we went from the very beginning, the very basics of it, you may have a spiritual experience where all your ideas, your conflicting ideas, becomes not two. So that could happen, and that can be that alone. That alone is a phenomenal experience when all your ideas merges into one, the amalgamation of just this one thing. So that can be a form of non-duality, but it's still not absolute pure non-duality. So you'll hear some teachers who may speak about non-duality from that perspective, and they may not include anything else. They're just talking about that, and that alone has its purpose and all that, and then it can move on to feelings and emotions. So conflicting feelings and emotions, because we all feel them, that can also collapse into not two. Right. So someone could have an experience of all their feelings and emotions becoming this holistic thing. So that could happen as well. And again, that is also very phenomenal. And then I can also move up to the amalgamation of individuals. So like if you look into like tantric sex and things of that sort, a couple can have an experience of absolute unity between each other. And that can also be seen as a form of non-duality, but it's not non-duality in the sense of everything collapsing into one. It's more of like a fourth or fifth dimensional form of a sexual oneness that two people can experience, and that could be a form of non-duality. So if you're talking to someone about non-duality and they've had the experience from a sexual union perspective, they may understand it from that point of view because they've experienced a direct experience between two people. That could happen. And then it can move up to the non-duality between all individuals. So that could happen. So with all human beings, at least how it's perceived in the within the mind of the individual, where they can see all human beings as one, right? That could happen as well. And then that can move up to the stage where all species experience. You can experience all species being this absolute unity within all species. That could happen, and it can go up and up and up, and they can get to the point where Atman. For those who don't know what Atman is, that would be like the Hindu equivalent of what maybe Christians call a soul. So you have Atman within you, which really that could be another different topic because it's not really within you, but for the human mind who's trying to conceptualize that, we just use that for now. So you have the Atman that's within you, and Advaita Vedanta. And also, if you ever hear the term Advaita means non-duality. So in Advaita Vedanta, which is one of the schools in Vedanta, they will talk about Atman being one and the same with Brahman, right? And that is, you can say, the ultimate form of non-duality, depending on how you look at Atman, because I can go on for days about what Atman is and can be, and how that's one and the same with Brahman. And for those who don't know what Brahman is the Hindu equivalent to, if you want to refer to as God, even though it's even broader than that. So you have Brahman, or Brahman, and that has no shape or no form, but it is the ground of all being, and it is everything that exists, that appears in existence, is a result of this ground of all being, which is Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
And one can have an experience with their Atman, or their soul, being one and the same with Brahman. And if you get to that point, you can say that you're experiencing, and you can even go even higher than that, but you're experiencing all that there is, which is non-duality, which you can get to the point where that could be called absolute monism.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just in a nutshell.
So I'm just kind of contemplating some of the questions that have come up with clients for me, over the last several years, whenever I've spoken about non-duality and Advaita. They often say, well, how do I have an experience of that? What does that look like? What do I have to do to get there? And, all of those kinds of questions, because what happens, of course, a seeker wants the ultimate goal, and they want it fast, and they want to get there, wherever the idea of there might be. So do you have any kind of tips, strategies, or suggestions that would help someone at least have, even if it's a fleeting experience of what that looks like?
There are many different ways of doing it, even though I never recommend trying to get there quickly. Like, trust me, like trying to get there quickly it can actually probably cause more damage than do more damage than good. So the nervous system, the subtle bodies, they have to be purified to take that from that level. So it's necessary, even though you have the odd person where it does happen very quickly. But in those experiences, I've heard, and I can't confirm this personally, but I've heard in those experiences, they go through the hard stuff later.
Yes.
The purification later. So the purification can happen before, where you purify the body, the subtle bodies, such as the astral body, the ether body, the emotional body, mental body, causal body, non-dual body. Even though the non-dual body doesn't need purification because it is the whole thing, but the bodies up to that point needs to be purified. But if you have the experience of a spiritual awakening experience, which includes non-dual, you may have to go through that afterwards, because there's no escaping this. The body, the nervous system has to change. It has to refine itself over and over and over again until it's purified enough so that you can embody non-duality in your everyday life. So that's something that's really important. So the goal should be to put in the work, whatever that work is. If it's meditation, in my case, as much as I've been meditating for a very long time, I've been using brainwave entrainment to do that. So with brainwave entrainment, it's synchronizing the two hemispheres of the brain, it's purifying the nervous system and all that. So not brain entrainment itself, but the low carrier frequency of brain entrainment is purifying the system, so that if you're lucky to have this and be blessed with this thing which we call non-duality, or be blessed with Advaita, that your body's prepared to handle it. Because when we talk about not to, we really mean not to.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, because I'm absolutely with you. There is no fast way to do it.
No.
It does take commitment. It takes effort. I think more with respect to kind of integrating the shadow, looking at the shadow and dealing with the psyche and all of that, because if that hasn't been dealt with, then no matter what kind of experiences you're given, grace gives you, there's always doubt, and kind of there's a lack of belief or whatever it is there in the psyche that hasn't been purified.
Yeah.
And that is very much the case. And and all great masters and great beings emphasize the same thing, even though it doesn't require time to attain the self, because the self is beyond time.
It's beyond time and space.
It seems, because of our humanity and the way we are, our humanness and so on and so forth, there's work that needs to be done before we can, I guess, acknowledge, embrace, and step into that somehow, or be with it.
Be with it, or at least being while you're still in the story, because in one of my experiences, I came to the realization that nothing I did got to that point.
Yes. Yes.
Very
Yes.
tricky, right? It's very tricky. Nothing
Yes.
I did uh, 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 got to that point. I was already that. So,
Yes.
but to make it interesting, because this thing that we are decides to create a story to make it interesting for the individual who's having the story in a sense. So it creates the story to make it interesting for the individual after having such an experience. But when you're in there, you realize that's what you laugh out loud and realize that I did nothing to bring this about. So it's
Yes.
very tricky. But
It it
from
is.
the individual's human standpoint who's creating the story, um, I will mention things like, meditation and this and that and self-inquiry and all that, even though there's nothing you did that brought
Yes. Yes. I'm with you because yeah, I mean I've shared several times, but I had a radical awakening in a lucid dream. I was given Shaktipat.
Yeah,
And then I was this kind of crazed seeker for, close to 30, maybe even more than 30 years. And I really was very ardent about it, with the practices and the meditation and the japa and the self inquiry and, you name it. I did it,
yeah,
retreats. And then one day I started to kind of feel almost disgusted by it, you know what I mean? And then there was a recognition that seeking was the obstacle, and I could spend the rest of my life seeking, 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 and I'll never attain what I was kind of desperately trying to find. And then, all of the practices fell away, and then I just deepened into the silence within my being and
mm-hmm.
saw that what I had been searching for had been here all along.
Yeah. Been there the
uh,
whole time.
the whole time. And
Yeah,
and the thing is it's so intimate and so accessible and available, it's overlooked. And we just keep believing that we have to do something, we have to heal the inner child or do whatever it is, the story.
yeah,
And that is to attain this kind of nirvana. And the thing that tripped me up, it really trips up a lot of people, is they really believe that it's the person and the personal story that is going to attain enlightenment. Like
mm-hmm.
you're going to climb the mountain and put your
Get to
kind
the
of
left.
pole
Yeah,
down and say, I did it, I did it, I
I
did
did it.
it.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's not that way at all.
it's not that way at all. And in fact, what happens is personal identification has to go.
That has to go. That's why as you know, the individual has to surrender itself, because the very thing that's the driving force that one believes is bringing them to this place of oneness. See, I'm using the term again, oneness, is the same thing that could be a hindrance. So it's a very tricky thing. I use this is what I say about it. It's like waiting for tomorrow to come. Tomorrow never comes,
Yes.
right? It's like that. It's always today. So if
Yes.
you see from that standpoint, it can be very easily to understand what we're saying here. Tomorrow never comes. So if you are waiting for tomorrow to come, you could be very disappointed because it never comes. Tomorrow is always today.
Yes. That's a great way of putting it. I
Yeah,
love that because
yeah,
it's so on point.
yeah.
And that's what happens.
Yeah, that's what
What
happens.
Yeah, and what happens is when you really, like, I was this crazy spiritual seeker. I was always like think about the next thing, the next practice, or even when I was meditating, even though I'd have profound meditations and all of those things, there was still a doer.
You're still a doer. Yeah.
And
And stories are interesting too, because stories are, we
yes,
we thrive for stories. So stories are important as long as the person realizes that there's nothing that you're really doing that's causing this.
mm-hmm.
Unless you're looking at it from a causal standpoint. If you're looking at it from a causal standpoint, then there has to be cause and effects. There has to be an action. Yep, there has to be a cause that leads to an action, and so on and so on. From that standpoint, but one needs to know that even that's an illusion.
Yes.
That oneness, that this non-dual presence is creating, because it has the power to do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the most creative thing, and it's doing it, yet it's beyond time. So even though it's doing it, that's part of the illusion that's within time, yet outside of time and space, nothing is being done. So even from that standpoint, the universe itself hasn't even been created. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a thought in its mind that creates this thing in the being. But from that standpoint of this non-dual presence, nothing exists, yet it all appears to be so. And that's what's
Yes.
so amazing about that, because you're making the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Even the
Yes.
idea of meditating and doing all these practices. But within cause and effect, that's what we're doing. We're
Yes.
creating up, just like when I say tomorrow never comes, I may prepare for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I may do all that stuff. So just say if I'm going to work and I know that I don't have time tomorrow to make lunch, I make it the day before,
Mm-hmm.
preparing for tomorrow. So all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff still happens. Yet when the next day, quote unquote, next day comes, it's still today.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you fall into the trap of believing that tomorrow will come, well, good luck with that, because it's tomorrow's always today. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing on a higher scale when it comes to enlightenment or non-dual presence, non-dual suchness. It's the same thing. You
Mm-hmm.
prepare, do all that stuff for it, but at the end of the day, you have to know and not be fooled by what's appearing, because what's appearing is not what it actually is. It's just an appearance, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And it's really about, honoring your humanity, honoring your personhood, honoring time, and your responsibilities and all of that.
All that stuff
But
within uniqueness.
but recognizing that you're beyond all of it, and that isn't you. That
Nothing
isn't
it's
your
you.
kind of primary identity, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Or you can say it's you, but it's not you. Because that's the
Yeah.
tricky thing about non-duality, right? You're removing the distinction between two things. So if
Yes.
there is a term for you and not you, that's what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, and the thing that we both know that happens in kind of spiritual communities is there can be an obsession about, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not the person, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, and then kind of bypassing, one's humanity and one's
Yeah.
humanness and one's human needs, and
Total bypassing.
yeah, and I certainly was guilty of that because I went through a period where I was just trying to meditate my life away, or run from the kind of the pain inside of me that I hadn't acknowledged. So it's very tricky,
It's very
uh,
tricky.
and you just have to be absolutely conscious of what you're doing, and really make yourself available
Make yourself
in a
available.
way.
That's where awareness comes in, right? To become
Yeah.
fully aware of what's going on, because your ego is always there trying to either it's a drive or it's a hindrance. And if you just become aware that that's what the ego is doing, uh in my case, that's where suffering goes away in that sense. It's because you just removed yourself from the equation. You're just watching
Yes.
it all happen as it happens within what we perceive as time. But time, again, is not what it appears to be, because all of that is within Maya.
Yes. Yes. So all of that said, I'm intrigued in asking you about your kind of your day job or the work that you do with young people. Do you find that even if you're not speaking about non-duality and meditation and all of these things, that your students and the people you interact with somehow receive a transmission from you because of your state?
Some of them say that. Some say that. For those who are there, who can understand to some degree what this is all about, they do mention that. Um, I work with a lot of teachers. I work with a lot of youth workers, frontline workers, teachers, school principals, and all that. And from time to time, a teacher or another colleague would mention something like, "There's something about you that's very calm," or something. Sometimes I'm just tired or something, but
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
sense of calmness about you that I've noticed. And I say, "Oh, thank you." So you hear stuff like that. People have mentioned about if I look into their eyes long enough, they start to feel something. Or there's another teacher who I just she had a she had a pain or something in her shoulder, and I just rubbed my hands together and I just touched her shoulder, and she says every time I do that, she can feel something changing in her shoulder. I don't know what happens afterwards because I never follow up, but she always says that it's always soothing. That type of stuff happens on a regular basis. But there was a time years ago where a lot of energy stuff would happen. So like if depending on my mood, I was at the point where power would shut off and things like that. A lot of that would happen. That doesn't happen too much anymore. But right now, it's just about sometimes people who are in my presence, they say they sense something, but not all people do. And
No.
some people, I noticed they're on the opposite. Some people are around me, they get triggered by me very easily.
Hmm.
There's that as well. They don't know what it is. They just say it's just something about me. But sometimes there's some people who I've met who are probably like they have some aspects of themselves that's in the archaic stage that when they're in my presence, they are triggered and they're emotionally triggered.
Yes.
That is very interesting too. So I have to watch out for those people because there's a few around me. So I have to when they come around, if we're not doing anything together, I try to not be in their space because the last thing I need is having some kind of a bit of chaos in the workplace is something that you don't need. But for the most part, most people are just trying to figure me out because no one understands me. So or at least very few people understand me. They can't figure me out. They don't know where to place me.
Yes.
They just
Yeah.
says, I'm here. There's something about you. Some people think it's a level of craziness. It's like you're an odd human being. I don't know what it is, but you're an odd human being. So
Yeah.
things like that. But when I'm not talking about non-duality, and a lot of times I am talking about it. So even within my work, when I'm talking to youth, I'm always talking about something in regards to spirituality one way or another, or I'm talking about something that's quote unquote non-spiritual, but I'm giving it from a spiritual perspective.
Hmm.
So youth, they come around a lot just to pick my brain or to sit with me, just to have these conversations. And sometimes they're just disputes on how I see reality. Because a lot of people like to challenge me on how I see reality. Because again, not too many people understand what's going on. So when I talk about how I see reality, they're just floored. Even just yesterday, we had a conversation with a group of young people, and the same thing. They're just trying to pick my brain, trying to understand this thing that I'm calling reality, and they just don't see it, but they're intrigued by it.
Hmm.
So there's probably some form of transmission happening there. I'm not always conscious of that. I just do what I do, and if something hits, something hits. But when I look back throughout the years of working with these people with these people for the last it's been almost 18 years now, lots have happened. So since I've been working with these individuals, some of them are now yoga teachers, meditation teachers. Some have become astrologists.
Wow.
Some are doing shadow work. Some are in training right now as we speak, doing shadow work training and things of that sort. So I didn't see any of that coming. I didn't know that any of that stuff would happen. But there's a lot of people right now in my corner, in my circle, who are now in these fields or in the beginning stages of these fields. So
Yes. So
yeah,
that speaks volumes. It's interesting what you said because I relate to all of that. Well, soon after, well,
you were a
actually,
school teacher, weren't you? Right?
yes, yes, I still am. I still teach. I still
Oh,
teach.
okay, okay.
So, but what happened was directly after having Shaktipat, there was all kinds of crazy electrical phenomenon that was going on. Light bulbs were bursting, and
Yeah.
my microwave stopped working, even though it was
Hmm.
brand new. There were fans, floor fans. They weren't plugged in, and they would just spin wildly. I mean, it was just there was crazy stuff. There was even like things that were moving. That I had a bird mobile in the corner of the room, and I
Yeah.
got up one morning, and it had moved all the way across to the other side of.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
it was stuff like
Real
that.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really, really wild stuff. And if I knew it was authentic, and I knew it was related to the awakening, and
Yeah.
and
To
to
Shakti.
have to have my husband witnessing it too. It just kind of confirmed that I wasn't going crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that lasted. I think maybe a year or 2 years, something like that, and then
Oh,
um, it just kind of fell away.
yeah.
But certainly, what I'd noticed with students is that there's a definite transmission that happens that I can't take credit for at all.
Yeah.
But I
All due to Shakti, right?
yeah, I especially some years ago, soon after Shaktipat, I was working in a government school here in the Bahamas, and the conditions were really not very good.
Hmm.
And I would have these students that were Baptist or Seventh Day Adventists or Catholics, Christians, and so on and so forth, and they would come into the room and they would put their hands together and go like that, and I've never and then in their work I could see in their artwork there were like lotus flowers and peacock feathers, and there was the Om sign, and these things that
Oh
were
wow.
really counter to what you would normally see in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And the same has continued as well. And I've certainly, with many of the students I've kept track of, they're really deeply into their own journey and their own process of awakening.
That's amazing.
And doing incredible things.
Doing incredible things, huh? That's
Yeah.
amazing.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So that that was the reason I asked, because I know that once you have had an awakening, and once you've dropped seeking and you realize the self and all of those things, then there's a knock-on effect with respect to who you come into contact with.
Who you come into contact with. Yeah, it's an amazing thing to see. Because like as I see these things happen, because also have students that like paint pictures. They have painted pictures of me and things of that sort. And I know that can get to someone's head. But they're just trying to find ways to express to you what you've done for them, even though all I really do is just speak.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes I do a little, where I may, put my hand on someone's shoulder or pass some type of energy through them, but all I do is speak. But people are trying to express to you how much they're moved by something.
Yes.
Even though
Yes.
I'm just
Yeah.
having a casual conversation with someone. So it's a good reminder of how people try to express their feelings towards you. And I had the fortune of watching that happen. I'm watching that happen right now. And then, of course, there's the other side of people where they're like, you know what, this guy's up to something. This guy, he's got to be a fraud. He's up to something. I don't know what it is, but he's up to something. So there's that too. They're not that expressive about it, but you can sense it. So
Yes. Yes. And do you yeah, this is a fantastic topic actually. But do you how can I put this? Do you utilize language or reframe language so that it's accessible? Like, for example, when I'm speaking to Christian students, I would never have spoken about the Shakti or the chakras or whatever, So I'll say the spirit told me to say, or Jesus told me to say, or whatever, just to make it accessible, because I found that language can be such a barrier
it sure
if
can.
if you're not careful,
You're not careful, right? I do to some degree. So if I am talking to Christians, I will use terms like God. I'll
Uh-huh.
do that. If I'm talking to Hindus, I say Brahmin. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to Muslims, because there's a lot of Hindus, a lot of Christians as well, but there's a lot of Hindus and Muslims in my community. So if I'm talking to Muslims and I'm very close to the Muslim community, I use Allah. So if I'm
Yes.
talking about chakras, um, I may still use the term chakra only because I may be talking about something they haven't heard about before, but I try
Mm-hmm.
to connect it to something that they would be familiar with. So I
Yeah.
do that. And even if I'm talking to an atheist, I use terms that would appeal to or relate to an atheist in that way. So I do use different language when I'm speaking to people. But there's something that I always will stay true to, that if I'm speaking about non-duality, I'm speaking about non-duality, but I'll speak about how
Mm.
it relates to the group or religion or philosophy that you're a part of.
Yes. Which is great.
Yeah,
And that's kind of takes experience to kind of understand that too, right? Because it can be difficult.
it can be difficult, especially when someone is talking about God. If it's when some people are talking about God, they're talking about something that's outside of them, sometimes
Mhm.
or within them. And I have to catch myself I don't need to remind them saying that everything is God. I don't have to remind them with that all the time. Because again, even if I told you that and you believed me, that's still not enough. It has
Mhm.
to be a direct experience. So when someone who's part of my spiritual circle and they say something like that, I have to like bite my tongue sometimes and just listen to what they're saying. So when they say, "Oh, what God did for me today, I prayed to God today and he granted me this wish," I just leave it alone and I just carry on with what they're saying and I add to what they're saying from that standpoint of how God is granting that person the blessing or whatever the case is. So I speak from that lens. But in the beginning, though, back in 2008, when I first had the awakening, oh, that was very hard for me. That was very hard
Yes.
for me. As soon as someone said something about, oh, I prayed to God the other day, I couldn't hold. I was like, oh, why do you feel? But now, as time goes on, I say, oh, I can't. I got to leave that alone. That's their belief system. It's not for me to try to change their belief system. So now, when they give me their personal stories, I speak about it from that standpoint. So when they're talking about a personal God, I speak from that standpoint. Because again, this ground of all beings creating that too. So
Yes.
everything that is happening is a result of this ground of all being, including any belief, whether I believe in the belief or not. All of that has come from the ground of all being because it has the power to do so. But it took me
Yes.
a long time to understand that at that point, because when I had that experience of this quote unquote, it wasn't the absolute non-duality that I ended off with, but it was what people would call Turiya, where it was the empty
Yes.
self recognizing its own divinity. It was at
Mm.
that level, and that was just enough for me to say, everyone needs to hear about this. I don't care who you are. You need to know about this. You need to hear about this. I have something to tell you. And then as time goes on, it's like, that's not that easy.
No.
There's times you got to know when to shut up. So,
Yes. 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 And just kind. Yes. And obviously share when it does feel like it's the right time.
when it's the right time, when it's needed. Yeah, it
Yeah.
takes a little bit of experience to understand. It's like not in every case I need to, you know, speak out or pronounce this thing of being whatever this thing is. So it took time to learn and understand that. Because here in my community, I'm known as being a radical. Everyone knows me as a radical. So you talk to anyone in my community that knows me, they may smile and they may laugh, say, "Oh yeah, that guy," because they for those who there are many people who are inspired by my work, and there's other people in my community. They just think, you know what, he's crazy. He's odd. He has these beliefs, and I'm like, I'm not the only one with this view. There are other people with this view. I'm not the only one, but they haven't been exposed to anyone outside of myself. So when they
Yes.
hear me speak this way, they think I'm probably the only one that's speaking this way. But
Yeah.
when I had that first awakening, I didn't know anyone like that. I had to go search people out, like looking for people like you. I had to search these people out to find out where these were because there weren't any people like that in my community except for the gentleman that I bumped into 2 years prior to my awakening, who came off as this who I would see as an enlightened being, and that intrigued me. But he doesn't live in my community. I met him in another community, and then after I had my awakening, he did appear in my community I bumped into him about 3 times where we had conversation. But within my community, that was totally unknown. But since then, 3 or 4 other people have at least had a glimpse of,
Yes.
of oneness. So at least 3 people, and there's been others who had a glimpse as well. But 3 of those people, it looks like it's starting to stick with them.
Fan-
Yeah. So yeah, I do what I do and see where it lands and where it leads.
mhm.
Um, but in regards to like absolute non-duality, I'm still waiting for that to stick within some of my participants.
Mm.
But they've had a glimpse, like a real good, strong one, something
Yes.
that will inspire them probably for the rest of their lives. So I'm seeing that happening. But in most cases, there are like lower ends of I don't want to say lower ends of spirituality, but it's not the absolute or anything like that. But a lot of people are tapping into their spirit. So
Hmm. And a lot of it, yeah, and certainly I see it here in the Bahamas, there's a need to let go of the old baggage with respect to religiosity, and the belief that, you can only know God through your priest or your minister, and, everything they say about the Bible and
mhm.
about your relationship with Jesus has to be the way. And there's often such a deep denial of one's innate, you know, self with a capital S,
Oh yes,
and the mystery of that. And there's a big, big fear of going against the community
that's right.
and worrying about being judged or being thrown out, or,
Yep.
and it's just terrible, and oftentimes it can be an orientation towards going to church every Sunday as a sort of obligation, having to look
Obligation.
right, having to say the right
Yeah,
thing, tithing, all of that. And there's
yeah,
obviously nothing wrong with churches and tithing and all of those
yeah.
things, but um, what I've seen is there's a real denial of this one's innate knowing, within that.
Within that. It's so true. It's so true. Just yesterday's conversation, one of our guys, he's actually the son of one of my good friends, and yeah, he can't get past that, not yet, anyway. Um, yeah, it's probably the stage that he has to go through, if it goes any further, because who knows, it may not even go past that. But that's probably his journey. So when I see it, I always have this thing inside me where I want to show them more that I want you to see who you actually are.
Hmm.
For some people, though, it may not happen in this lifetime. It may happen in other lifetimes. So my job is just to point them in that direction. Hopefully, I can point them in that direction. But we have that a lot here too, in the community that I work, and I work and live in the same community. So I live and work in the same community. So everybody knows me. I'm everyone's neighbor pretty much. So and that comes up all the time. But when I look at it from a psychological standpoint or from the point of sociology, um, people latch on to cultural circles because that is their source of survival, right?
Yeah.
Because within that circle, that's where you're probably going to meet your significant other. That's where you're gonna get that job promotion. That's where you're going to get all the things that you need in regards to your well-being. You need these things, and it's hard to get those things if you don't follow the status quo. So
Yes.
it's totally understandable why people do it. It's just people are unconscious when they're doing it. So they latch on and say, well, I have to follow this thing because I was brought up in this religion. And I was like, yeah, I get that you were brought up in this religion. Do you understand there are other religions that have different beliefs? And they're just as strong in their religion as you are in yours,
Hmm.
right? And people have to understand that it's like yours are it's not the only one. There are many different ways that people go about this. Uh, and I grew up in the Pentecostal church. Like my father is a church bishop, is a bishop, a Pentecostal bishop, and I've let go of all those things personally. This is what I did because I felt that need to do that, and so far nothing bad has happened to me. So,
Yes.
so when people say,
Yes.
"Well, this is going to happen to me," there's going to be a punishment. What about lake and fire and all that stuff? And I say, you know what, lake and fire, fire and brimstone, hell, whatever you want to call it, hell is a real thing from the standpoint of the mind. So
Hmm.
the limited mind can create that. And for those who've gone through the dark night of the soul and who've gone through, I may have mentioned in the last episode about all the atrocities I had to go through prior to having that awakening. And that is a form of hell. So from the
Hmm.
standpoint, hell is a real thing as long as there's a mind present. But once you
Yes.
transcend the mind and all that stuff goes away, and then you realize that all there is all there is. And most people will probably never get to know that, which is fine because again, that's coming out of the ground of all being. That's where the ground of all being, because the ground of all being is trying to experience everything it can experience, and that's the way it chooses to do that. And but I know that at some point, it doesn't have to be in that person's lifetime, but at some point, within the cycle of death, birth and rebirth, or death, birth, and what's the best way of saying that? Birth, death, and rebirth.
Yes.
Um, they will come to know of what it is because I believe that's what Brahman is trying to do
Mhm.
throughout all human beings, throughout all species, throughout everything. It's trying to get to know itself, but it's creating the hardest, uh, it's creating the most difficult mission possible to do it because it's all powerful, it's unlimited, it's the ultimate, it's all those things. So it had and it's beyond time and space, so it can do that because it knows the ending result anyway. It just
Yes.
there's a part of it may choose to want to forget it just to see if it can do it, but it does it every time, and it's already done it. Just like how I said, like tomorrow never comes. It's already done it. It's just
Yeah.
living out this experience of multiplicity, and I believe that it wants to do it in every single way possible. So you're going to have people who are going to be stuck, and in that time and place, that's probably what's supposed to happen in that time and place. But eventually, throughout the cycle of death and rebirth, they will come to know what they actually are. Who knows how long I've been at it? I could have been at this for thousands and thousands of times before coming to this realization. Who knows?
Hmm. Yes. Yes. I think that's true of all of us,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. So
Although, actually, I do have to say, from that, very early on in my childhood, I was always looking for someone or something that could prove what I knew inside, that there was more to this reality than, I'd been taught.
oh, interesting. You came at it quite young.
Very, very, very young. And I was hearing voices and seeing things and having out of body experiences and
Hmm.
visitations and psychic phenomenon and all of those things. But, I wisely, I think, opted to stay quiet, not say
Same.
anything
Yeah.
because of being raised. And it was that time as well. It's very different now, but
Mm.
certainly back when I was young, especially in the Catholic sort of tradition,
Oh,
you
you were
just
raised Catholic.
yes, so you
Oh,
just
no.
didn't go around telling people that you'd seen things and heard things.
No.
You could you had visitations with Jesus and angels and loved ones who'd made their transition and all of that.
Mhm.
So I just learned to keep quiet about it
Yeah.
until I was older, and then began. And the thing as well is I assumed that everybody was experiencing life in the same way that I was, and it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was a little older that I realized, oh, that actually isn't the case.
Not the case, right? Yeah. Not the case.
So yeah, it's been quite the journey, but I'm really glad that things have changed. The world kind of view.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but there's
Yeah.
definitely more openness. And there's, because when I was very young and I was interested in yoga, as the only person in my family who wanted to do yoga, I just had this thing.
How old were you then
I
when
was
you
about I was about 14. I was 14. I don't know how I
oh,
knew about yoga, but
yeah.
I think I watched a National Geographic program. That was what happened with my father, and we saw this thing about yogis, and one guy, he was put in a glass or perspex box, and it
Yeah.
was chained, and they dropped the box into the deep end of a swimming pool, and he was underwater, cross-legged, with his eyes closed, and he was underwater for 45 minutes to an hour, and then they pulled him up, and
Wow.
then out in the box, he just stood up nimbly and walked away as if nothing happened. And my father turned to me and he said, "Do you believe it? Do you think it's really true?" And I said, "Yes, it is true." I absolutely knew with absolute conviction that it was true.
Yeah.
And so I, then wanted to learn about yoga. And I remember going to see if I could find a book. I mean, obviously this is way before the internet and all those
Yeah.
things. So I found one book in a like a newsagent's, like a bookstore, and I used that book faithfully. And I used to do asanas, try and find a quiet place in
Hmm.
my home and do these asanas. But my family were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, she's crazy."
She's nuts.
We're poor working class family. It's
Yeah.
just like, what is this weirdness? And so I came in with that. I came in with that knowledge, and I came in with that drive to find somebody. And I didn't realize, obviously, at the time, that I was actually looking for this guru, this great being who I must
Mhm.
have known in a prior lifetime.
Yeah.
When I saw him, I recognized him immediately.
You could have been
So
working at this so hard in the last lifetime, and that, like, who knows? I don't know at what age he passed away before transitioning to here, and
yeah,
all of that carried into here, and it had to continue to work.
yes,
That's amazing, though. Yeah, who knows, right? There's all these theories of what could be taking place, why certain children pick the stuff up very early. But yeah, I think it's possible.
yes. I mean, and I do have to say, the minute I laid eyes on this great being, whose name was Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri,
That
when
was in your lucid dream, right?
in a lucid dream, yeah,
Yeah.
I saw him, and literally everything collapsed. I just bowed down. It was like instant and absolute recognition that I knew him, and he was the one I'd been searching for.
Hmm.
And he gave me Shaktipat, and it wasn't until later that I didn't even know what that was. As a Catholic working class girl, who knew?
Yeah.
I mean, so it took some time to integrate what he gave me, and then kind of at least come to some realization about what this was, and then what was to come next. So
Could you mention his name again? What's his name?
yes, his name is Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri.
And is he a being that existed before in this realm, or has he always been in that realm?
No, he lived in India, and he was renowned in India for giving Shaktipat. And I think he took Mahasamadhi, or he died
Yeah, Mahasamadhi.
in, I think in the mid 60s or late 60s. I mean, I was very, very, very young then. But he Yeah, he used to. He would bilocate. He would appear in several places at the same time.
Time.
He would give Shaktipats. People would go to him. He later in life he established himself in Ganeshpuri, this little
Hmm.
village, and thousands upon thousands of people would go and for his darshan. And he would just either tap them on the top of the head, or just
Yeah,
sitting in his presence would awaken them.
would awaken them.
And yeah, he's really renowned. There's even footage of him on YouTube, actually. um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Now,
so
if you told me that story years ago, I would have never believed you.
mhm.
After receiving Shaktipat myself, going through Darshan, it's a real thing.
It's absolutely a real thing. And there's no way I could dispute it, because
Yeah,
holy moly, and after he gave me Shaktipat, the propensity to have these out of body experiences with great beings just like blew up. I mean, it
yeah,
was so I was having these dream darshans and initiations from great master yogis, like Swami Ram Tirth,
yeah.
Ananda Mahima, these
Hmm.
great beings. And they would come in one dream. This yogi it was like I was in India, in this kind of rural place, walking along a dusty road. And there was this great being walking towards me. And I could tell by the vibration of his presence that he was a great siddha, he was a great being.
Yeah.
I just kind of walked towards him, and I went down on all fours and then put my head down on the ground.
Oh, yes.
And then I
Full
stood
surrender to
up.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he said to me, I can give initiation. Would you like? And I said, yes, please. And so he took his thumb and then he pressed his thumb, here on my forehead.
Huh.
And I was filled with the most incredible Shakti.
Yeah.
And it just like blasted through me. And then he moved his thumb away and I just pranamed. And I said, what is your name? And he said, Swami Ram Tirth.
Mm.
So I just committed to remembering that, because sometimes when you come out of a lucid dream, sometimes, the memory of what is happening becomes kind of, it diffuses or whatever.
Yeah.
So when I woke up, I went online, did some research, and that sure enough, Swami Ram Tirth is right there. He was a great mathematician. He was a siddha. He would give Shaktipat and so on and so forth. This happened to me again and again and again and again and
By
again.
the same guru.
No, a
Oh,
different guru.
by different gurus. But happened to
Another
you.
one,
Okay.
yeah, another one was Ramakrishna Paramahansa.
Yeah.
He came. I pranamed to him, and he stepped onto my back, and I felt him kind of walking down my back, and then he disappeared inside of me, and I knew he'd gone inside my heart, and
Wow.
then he filled me with his energy.
And
Another one,
that one was a lucid dream as well, right? And
that was
then
all. That was a
hey,
lucid dream as well, and also,
you're an
you know, I,
incredible lucid dreamer. I can tell you that right now.
yes,
I've only had 4 or 5 lucid dreams in my life. And what you're telling me is that you're able to tap into this on a regular basis and meet these masters too.
yes,
That
yes.
alone is just such an incredible feat.
Yes. Well, it's nothing. I can't take credit for any of it. This is all since Nityananda gave me Shaktipat, and then so I was having these amazing experiences, initiations with these great beings, and then
Yeah.
also His Holiness the Dalai Lama came many times to give me teachings and to show me different forms of meditation, and
Wow.
then Sufi masters.
Masters as well. Okay.
This is Mrs. Irina Tweedy and Llewellyn Vaughan Lee. These are great masters in the Sufi tradition. So I had lucid dreams with them.
Hmm.
And then Tibetan masters and lamas would come, and Native American shamans. I mean, it was just so amazing. It still happens.
And it's still happening. That's
Yeah, but I
amazing.
went through a period where it was very, very intense. And what I realize now is that I believe that all of that was to enable me to be able to have conversations with anybody from any path, faith, or tradition, because there's a shared commonality. Because via those initiations, it was like I am able to be with whoever, I'm sharing with. And, no matter what, even if they're Buddhist, I mean, I've never really studied Buddhism, but I understand it. And I was even having experiences with these great gods and goddesses. I had an experience with Vajra, what was her name now? Vajra Yogini or something like that. And this great kind of, yes.
Mm.
And just so that went on for a long time, and it still does, and I still hear them.
What was the period between when it was the most intense? What was that time? What was the time period like?
It was about 20 years. It was from 1989 till 2000, but it still continues, but not as intensely as then. That was just it's kind of
The bodies
beyond.
are purified, right? So yeah.
Yes. So
You're probably in the maintenance stage now. So because like your nadis are purified, your chakras are doing whatever it needs to do. Life force, Kundalini Shakti is flowing through you freely because I can feel it from you. So it's like even though we're distances away, I can feel that. So it's like so that you're at that place now. So it's like you don't need to go through that that full purge that you're going through in that 20-year time period.
Yes, and it was really intense. And yes, and ahead of any session I do with a client, any interview, whatever discussion, I always invoke these great beings. And what I realized many years ago is that we become a vehicle for the transmission of this awakening power, is what happens.
That's what happens. Yeah.
And and so people feel it. And I know, many people I've worked with have got Shaktipat, and many people who've read the book have received Shaktipat from reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we can't take credit for any of that.
Yeah, we can't take credit, at least not, well, we can't take credit at all, I guess, but especially from the individual standpoint, because every time a guru gave you Shaktipat, every time you received darshan, the universe is doing it.
Yes.
But the universe is doing it to itself, which is in this case the projection, which is you. So the universe is doing it to itself. And so if the universe is doing it to itself, and itself is receiving from the universe, who is there to take credit?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful for me to see the embodiment of God, source, the Shakti in these great beings.
Oh yeah.
Because somehow I think I certainly needed to have proof. I need to have proof in a living being, rather than, reading about a saint or an angel or whatever who was no longer on the earth. And it was that made
so that the logical mind can surrender as well. So that so there's like the logical mind said, I need confirmation that this is a real thing, so that I can let go of myself, surrender myself to all that is. And sometimes that's the only thing that's needed so that the search will stop.
Yes. But, even what I'm realizing now is that in 1989, when I had this lucid dream with Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri, through this absolute recognition, all doubt, it was just like everything collapsed. All the doubt fell away. So I've never doubted the siddhas or the initiations or, when they come to me or give me teachings or whatever. I've never doubted the place from which this comes. I've always, and even when I'm directed to do something, to say, I don't know, create a website or write a book, I've never doubted the place from which this comes. But it took me personally, it took time to be able to recognize that the self within me, the pure eye of yourself within me, was the same as the self in the great being that I was.
Exactly.
And to recognize that self, it's a self seeing itself. And it kind of took time for that to kind of like finally land.
Yeah.
And then when it did, it was like everything just collapsed. The whole seeking game just absolutely collapsed. And it was over.
And it was over. That's incredible. Like you don't hear stories like that too often, right? Especially as we interact with people around us. That's why I guess I go on a mission on some level where let me see if I can find other people like me, because even though our stories are unique, every time we hear them, I just say yes, like
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah,
yeah, yes. Well,
resonate
look
with
at
me.
it. Yeah, and the other thing is that I guess the reason I was prompted to create this channel with the focus of, interviewing mystics and near-death experiences and people waking up to the truth of the self
Mhm.
is that in the sharing of these stories, again, there's a great transmission that happens
Happens.
and
Yeah,
beyond time and space. So whether somebody's watching this today, tomorrow, next year, next week, whenever,
yeah.
the Shakti is still alive. It's
Still
still
alive.
really vibrant. It doesn't
Transmission is
come
still
and go.
happening.
Exactly. And I've seen that again and again and again, and it's just so amazing. It still blows my mind the way
Yeah.
that happens.
That's
So
probably why unconsciously why I just continue to write. I don't know who's reading and how many people are reading them. I just do it. And sometimes you check the numbers, you're like, okay, 7 people read this.
yes,
But it
yes,
doesn't
yes,
matter. You just do whatever you do, because even if it's only 7 people and that one person out of the seven receives that transmission and wakes up to its true self,
yes.
my
It's
job is
worth it.
done. It's worth it.
E- Exactly.
Yeah,
Because
I never
like
even have to hear of that person. My
yeah,
job is done.
exactly. So because like last night I was on Threads and I just posted something, I forget even what it was. And then there were two or three people commenting. And then we started having a conversation and they wanted to know more and
Mhm.
and it was beautiful. So I was able to sort of direct them to YouTube to listen to some of the videos and so on and so forth. And then it's like that's my job. As you said, my job is done.
Yeah, mission complete.
All right. So anyway, on that note, I guess we should bring this conversation to an end. But it's been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me
Really
too.
enjoyed
Love
it
this.
so much. It's just so vibrant. It's incredibly. I always feel energized when I have these kinds of conversations. And again, it's a gift of grace, the gift of transmission that we're all receiving,
Mhm.
and
All
it's
receiving and giving.
yes, exactly, exactly. So, Morgan, before we kind of wrap up, do you want to just maybe again remind people where they can find you? Um,
Oh, where they
Tell
can
them.
find me. Gosh. Um, you can find me everywhere. You can find me here on YouTube, I Instagram. I have a link tree. You can find me at linktree/Morgan O. Smith. I believe that is. I think that's what it is. But if you put that in, you'll find it. You'll find me. I have all my stuff there. You'll also find my energy meditation program, which is also there as well. A lot of people are now tapping in and now are using our part of the program and going through the actual sessions, the meditation brain entrainment sessions, and that's called energy. All that could be found on my link tree, just to make it easier. But yeah, that's where it can be found. If you send me a message, I respond to everyone. Even though I must say I received a message yesterday from someone, but the message it was written in a way where it's like it wasn't written from a personal level, and I don't know how to respond. So other than that, I'm not sure how to respond to that email, but I try to respond to every email that I get. So I guess now that I still have to respond to that person. I didn't know how to answer it.
Yes, fair enough.
And I don't know how they found me. So it's one of those things that they didn't introduce themselves; they just went right into it. So
Um,
yeah, so
fair-
I'll have to find a way to respond to that person. So I keep my
yes.
promise. But for the most part, I respond to everyone. So you can find me anywhere. I'm always there. You can find in my link tree. You'll also find my blog, which is Morgan O. Smith. I can't remember what my blog thing is.
It's okay.
Morgan O. Smith blog, I think. Whatever.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I can't remember. Morgan O. Smith blog, I think it is. You'll find me there as well. Every day I try to put up a new posting in regards to what I'm thinking. What I'm trying to do is people are trying to pick my brain to try to figure out what this all is. And I have no way of explaining it. So I try to do my best to try to break it down piece by piece. So every time I have a thought, I try to write a blog post about it to see if I can create a collection of everything, of all my thoughts. And it's going to take a lot of posts to do that.
Yes,
Stuff
yes.
I can't speak on a regular basis. So I try to, so if people are interested and are intrigued by that, please feel free to read my stuff there as well. And yeah, but I'm around.
Excellent. And I'll have the links. I'll make sure and put the links in the show notes so people can just tap and go, you know?
All right, make it easier. Yeah, they can just tap in, just press on the link and all that. So yeah, but I'm here.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you so much for joining me, Morgan. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed
Oh,
it
my
today.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely wonderful. And thank you all for joining us today. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, then please let other people know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, again, please do so. That will make us very happy. And if you have questions, feel free to ask questions and we'll be here and we'll answer them as best we can. And in the meantime, be well, take it easy, and see you again soon. Bye.